What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking after for the future. I'm also going to break down what's going on with the overall markets and how this may affect Tesla based off the news, data, and technicals that just came out, and what I do predict to happen to Tesla for the remainder of this week. And before I break anything down about that, before I talk about why Tesla could actually see a very nice bounce very soon, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $3,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just 3 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So when it comes to Tesla, this thing's down about 1.37% for the day. And I did actually tell you guys that the number to watch was around this 188 zone. If we broke below it, there was some support around this 185, but I told you all that we would likely see this gap get filled. Instead, Tesla actually managed to hold 185, and now this makes me very, very curious about how this will end up playing out. Now, in my opinion, to be blunt with you guys, I believe that there are two main possibilities for Tesla that are most likely going to play out from the technical side. What's good about Tesla is we do have a bullish divergence developing. If you look at the RSI where it was back here, we saw the RSI around like 41, 47, 48, 50, 60, when this thing was in the 170s. And right now, Tesla actually, the share price is actually around 189. Our low for the day was in around the like 185 zone. And Tesla's RSI actually reached those levels, if not lower, hitting 39, 44, and very low levels. So the RSI is making this lower low, but the price is making this higher low. That's actually a bullish divergence. And we're most likely going to see Tesla push to the upside by Friday, in my opinion. However, before we push up, there are a couple of things I have to talk about that are very important. Tesla has not finished filling this gap, so there is a risk that if we break the low we made from today, we could come down to fill that gap first and then try to bounce, or we might just bounce from here. Either one of them are very, very possible because there is a possible inverse head and shoulders that could be forming on Tesla. I know it's a little hard to see, so I'm going to hide my drawings and also make this a little larger for you. Hopefully, you guys can see this. Let me just close our MACD just real quick. There's a possible inverse head and shoulders that could be developing like right about here. This could be like the left shoulder. This could be like the head. And this could be the right shoulder that's forming. Now, we're supposed to actually bounce somewhere around this like 185 to 186 level. That's where Tesla bounced today. If we hold this low and we don't actually fill the gap down here, this could end up playing out, which means Tesla could actually try to fly to about 200 or even higher than that, maybe because of deliveries. That is a real possibility. It does align very well with it. But if Tesla ends up breaking down even lower to fill this gap first, there is still a possibility of it bouncing. It wouldn't necessarily invalidate this, but I don't want anyone to solely trade and invest based off this one pattern alone. It's very important to understand the fundamentals of the market, the risks involved based off what's about to come, and also the big event, which is delivery day. There's no guarantee Tesla will kill it on delivery day, but I do believe the odds favor that it will. But once again, always know the risks and be very, very careful. But now I want to talk about the market first before I break down more technicals. One thing to remember is we have some very important dates coming up. For Wednesday, it's not as important. We actually have the Fed bar giving another testimony. We also have some mortgage data coming out, which is not too huge, but the much bigger days are going to be Thursday and Friday. Thursday has some GDP data, which is absolutely massive. This will affect how the market moves. And then we also have the initial jobless claims data coming out as well, alongside more Fed speakers. So a lot of market moving events are happening on Thursday. Then on Friday, we have the PCE data coming out. This could actually cause the market to tank or not. But overall, I do want to believe it won't affect Tesla way too much because it's going to be, I believe, the last trading day for Tesla before the deliveries report comes out. And if that ends up being the case, Tesla could still outperform the market on this day as long as Tesla holds up pretty well around these levels. Now, when it comes to the overall option chain of SPY, I want to note something very important. Over the last trading day, we saw a big increase in the amount of puts that were bought, also the calls that were bought. So we did see about 100,000 calls being bought, but we saw over 100,000 puts being bought for Friday. Overall, the put to call ratio is at about 2.5, with 395 being max pain. The market makers are going to try to pump the markets most likely near the end of the week. However, even though it would benefit them and they're most likely going to do that, there's no guarantee that's going to happen because we have PCE coming out and some very big data. So once again, I can't promise anything about this solely, but it is very possible and very likely they might try to prop us up once again, try to get us to hold these levels because the majority of investors are shorting pretty hard. When it comes to Tesla and the overall, traded contracts for the day, we saw a lot of open interest and lots of entries for that $190 call for Tesla, lots of big orders for the March 31st entries. So we're starting to see lots of whales come in and starting to buy. We also saw the Tesla put around 185 being very popular. That is where Tesla dropped today, followed by the $200 call and the 195 call for Tesla being some of the most traded contracts of the market for today. So Tesla is being traded like crazy, and this is making me think that someone may know something. Maybe a lot of whales might try to come in and try to pump Tesla as we approach deliveries. Deliveries will be coming out, I believe, in the very beginning of April, either the first through second day, maybe over the weekend. If that ends up coming out very, very strong, this will help Tesla big time. But if it ends up being a flop, this will affect the share price as well. So it's going to be a big risk. Please be very careful. But based off the data I'm seeing, the odds do favor Tesla doing very well. I will show you that in a couple of minutes. But I want to note something else that's very important. When Tesla announces big events or it has lots of data coming out, we have a tendency of seeing the share price rally as we approach the dates. This tends to happen because of lots of hype approaching the days and also because of what the media is kind of building up right now. There's so many articles coming out about how Tesla's on pace for another record quarter. So many analysts are saying the same thing, and this most likely will help fuel more and more hype for Tesla. We actually saw a lot of analysts from different places. We saw some from Morgan Stanley and also another one from I believe it was like Wedbush or somewhere, who are saying the exact same things, that Tesla's most likely going to break the records, get us at least 425,000 deliveries, and produce over 433,000 cars. If Tesla could actually meet those numbers and break another record, this once again could be very bullish for the share price. I want everyone to be ready for it, but at the same time, be prepared for anything because there's no guarantee it's going to happen. I want to make that as clear as possible. But in my opinion, if I could give you guys my guess, I think Tesla's going to beat. I mean, they do have a tendency of doing that, and they are working very hard. Now, there was some more news that came out affecting Tesla's overall, performance. There has been a lot of talk about the new Model 3 that came out based off its specs. A lot of the specs are very similar to before, but what else is very good is there's been some talk about more price cuts that could be coming very soon. If that's the case, it could help spur up demand again and help Tesla on a much larger scale. But the only thing that would concern me about it would be the margins for Tesla. Could Tesla maintain some good margins? Could we still get a strong earnings despite these price cuts? We will find out in the next couple of weeks during the next earnings, which I believe is going to be around April 19th. We're getting very close to it anyways. Now, when it comes to Tesla's inventory levels, I want to note that very recently, right here, we saw a big increase in inventory. This basically means that there was a decrease in demand ever since the news came out about the facts that one of the Teslas does not qualify for the EV tax credit. This had a very negative effect on many different models, from the X and also the Model Y. However, we are starting to see them getting bought up again, so this is a good sign. They are actually still showing signs of good demand. I want to see this drop even harder to end this quarter. I really want to see it. Tesla's offering over 10,000 miles of free charging. I think that's very, very awesome that they're doing this for their customers to incentivize more people to buy their cars. I believe that this is good for them, and for the most part, we're actually seeing these inventory levels very low for the quarter. This means that there is a good chance Tesla's going to do well in the USA. I'm very confident Tesla's going to kill it in China. They're actually already very close to beating the record. If not, they've already beaten it if you look at the data so far. So in China, they're doing very well. In Europe, they're doing very well. In the US, we're not as sure because of this big spike in inventory levels in the beginning. And also, we have a small spike right here. But once again, I'm very optimistic and I still think Tesla could kill it. So I'm hoping Tesla does very well in the US, and I still predict Tesla will still do it. So I'm guessing Tesla might even rally going into next week thanks to a good report. But I don't really know for sure, so don't solely invest based off that. It's a risk, so make sure you manage risks, not financial advice, by the way. As far as the price pairs ratio goes, we were getting a rejection right here. This was like the top area, and I did see this coming down a bit. It did come down just a little bit, but now that Tesla has the potential to bounce very soon, there's a chance that this thing could shoot up one last time as we approach the big event until the event starts. So if this ends up happening, there is a risk of Tesla becoming a little bit overbought, and it might actually be a little negative for like the medium term, because for the medium term, I do believe the market has a lot of downside coming. But for the short term, this could be very bullish if Tesla continues to gain relative strength as more buyers step in and it gains more momentum in the process. If that happens, right, for the short term, Tesla could still make a big move. We could see Tesla get back above 200 if they give us a very strong deliveries report. Now, Citigroup has actually said they're pretty neutral on Tesla. They're not too bullish and not too bearish, which is completely fine. That's pretty good because other banks that came out over the last few weeks have been more bearish, saying Tesla won't do as well, or they're just barely going to perform with the market and things like that. So now some banks are giving better forecasts, better views. That's a good sign as well. As far as earnings go, Tesla has a tendency of giving us strong earnings. I'm hoping we continue this going into mid-March when earnings starts. If they kill it during earnings, that's going to be a good sign for them. But if they end up missing because of those margins, if their profitability is not as great, things could also change for them. We have to be very careful. I also want to note that as far as Wednesdays go, Tesla is only green about 49% of the time. So be very careful tomorrow. Once again, I did mention to you guys we could see a little bit more downside before a really nice bounce. But overall, I am still thinking it's more likely we are going to see that. We didn't see a whole lot of shorting a couple of days ago. The shorting has decreased a bit on Tesla. Could it be that they know something? Could these analysts know something is about to happen or not? I don't really know, but at the end of the day, I'm happy if they're not shorting as hard for the time being. What isn't too good, or I would say not too bad about Tesla actually, is the fact that we have very low volume. But you have to remember, we're dropping on low volume. That tells me that Tesla is still very price sensitive to higher levels of volume. So if Tesla gets 150 million in volume, like going into like next week or going into like Friday, the share price could still make a big move. It could still be very volatile. That's why we have to be very prepared for it to make crazy big moves when the time is right. The short volume has been on a big uptrend. We're seeing more shorting, at least as of like yesterday, and it actually reached about 67%. Now, I'm not seeing the same type of shorting going on, but there was a little bit more selling pressure as there were some fears involving another seatbelt issue. I will talk more about that maybe like some other day, but I want to talk more about the technicals and kind of just get this more out of the way. When it comes to Tesla, once again, like I told you, there's a possible inverse head and shoulders developing. Now, I don't know if Tesla's going to drop a little bit more to fill this gap and then try to bounce between this 180 to like 183 zone, or if this thing is going to be more symmetrical and we end up actually bouncing very close to where this previous left shoulder was. I will break this down in more details in a few minutes, but I want to talk about the market first. One thing you have to remember is the fact that looking at SPY, we are still respecting this bear flag like setup. Now, if it continues to just chop around like this, we're most likely going to see it still remain stuck between the daily 50 and 200 moving averages. We're still stuck. We're not really doing much. Resistance is around the 50 moving average with support around the 200. So what's very important is, give me 1 second, guys. I need to drink a bottle of water. But what I wanted to say that's very important is, so what's very important is looking at SPY, this thing's down about 0.22%, right? It's been trading back and forth, and we're continuing to see it looking very, very indecisive. Now, it's still stuck between these two moving averages, and I just wanted to note that as it continues to move going forward, it's still stuck. And I do think this thing might come a little bit lower to retest the lower end of this. We could see this thing come all the way down to about 392. If this thing ends up happening, if this thing ends up dropping just a little bit more, there is a chance it might try to bounce off this trend line one last time, especially near the end of the week. But until then, it's still looking kind of indecisive. So we're just basically stuck right now, trading sideways. There's not a whole lot going on with SPY. But once again, I could see a small pullback followed by a bounce. On the QQQ, this is actually looking better than SPY because it came down and ended up retesting this like 304 level. And then all of a sudden, this thing ended up getting a really small bounce right here. And it is showing some signs of momentum to try to push up and fill this gap. I'm not sure if the QQQ is going to come down first, maybe retest this low and then bounce, or if this thing is just going to keep going. But overall, it looks to me like the QQQ might be going for a green day tomorrow, and it might try to push up just a bit. Now, what else is looking kind of bullish is NEO. So far, NEO has a potential bullish triangle that's actually developing. This is actually very good news for the time being. I do think the market might try to drag this thing down just a little bit near the very beginning of the day. But I think that as long as NEO holds these levels, as long as it holds very close between 8.7 or higher, it has the potential to make an even bigger move after deliveries come out in April. So it's still looking pretty good. What isn't that great for the markets is the fact that the VIX, if anything, the VIX is actually around this like almost 20 level. This is actually where the VIX has a tendency of bouncing. So when the VIX ends up bouncing, if this thing does end up bouncing, this will actually lead to the market coming down. However, it is still on a very big downtrend. If I actually pull up our MACD here, the VIX is still continuing to just downtrend over and over again. So there's a good chance that whether it bounces or not, I don't know how much it's going to bounce by. It could actually break below 20 and get back to that 18 support if we can't actually hold 20. What I'm seeing for the VIX most likely is it's going to try to bounce. The market might come down a little bit tomorrow, but then if it fails to break this high, if it fails to get above like 21.4 or at least the 20 moving average, it could eventually still come down later on to about 19, if not 18.6. That could be bearish as well. Amazon has a bullish divergence on the hourly time frame. Amazon's actually looking pretty nice. So far, in my opinion, if Amazon could just hold this level, it's most likely going to see a nice counter trend to try to get back to like 100 over the next couple of days, in my opinion. Now, I must note to you all that we have some big data coming out, so I can't like promise it, or I'm not going to say these things with as much certainty, but technicals are telling us that we're most likely going to get a bounce on Amazon. We're most likely going to see this thing go to like 100 very soon. Finally, when it comes to looking at like Apple, for example, it came down to about 157 point, what is this? 157.65 is where it closed. We actually closed just above 157.5. Now, that's actually some very interesting news because we saw Apple come down to about 155 and bounce. Because Apple held 157.5, there's a good chance it's going to chomp around a bit and maybe try to push up to get to 160 very soon. We have to hold 157.5 first in order for us to do that. If it manages to do that, that would be a pretty good sign. In my opinion, it's still very possible. Meta held 200. We managed to close around 200. We have a gap up here. It looks to me like Meta might try to fill this gap very soon, try to get to 202 to 204. If it does pull that off, this could be once again being correlated with the overall market and also tech. This could also help the market pump. Looking at Microsoft, once again, it's holding up nicely. We actually held 275. I don't know if it's going to come down to retest 272 first and then try to bounce, or if it's going to just fill this gap and keep going. We might see this thing approach around like 280 very soon. Once again, it looks to me like it's getting ready for a bounce. Google held 100 quite nicely. It held it very nicely. In my opinion, it looks to me like as long as it holds this 100 zone, it has the potential to try to bounce and get back to some very important levels. We also have this gap up here around this like 105 zone. It might try to bounce and get back to like 103. Finally, for the 10-year treasury yield, I just want to note that right now on the daily chart, it's pumping, but it has some major resistance very close to the 50 moving average, also around where the 36.4 zone is. If it pushes up a little bit, this could be bearish for the stock market initially, but if it rejects off this 36.4 area, if it fails, it could come down to fill this gap. If that happens, the market could try to push up a little bit. That could be good for Tesla. So now I'm going to end the video by just talking about Tesla. And I do apologize earlier about my voice. I mean, I'm not going to cut that out of the video. I want to post this as soon as possible because if I do try to cut it out, it's going to take me many hours by the time it renders and everything. So I'm just going to try to post this just to get this as fast as possible out there for every single one of you. For Tesla, I want to talk about what's going on now. So now that I went over those possibilities, let's go over the bullish and bearish possibilities and break down what I think is going to happen. If you're really bullish on Tesla and you think Tesla's just going to break out from here and it's not going to like break below 185, it's going to most likely then break 190, retest the 200 moving average on the hourly, this 192 zone, break that and try to get back to 195. Over the next couple of days, if Tesla manages to break 195, it is most likely going to get all the way up to 200 or so, all the way up there. Now, if Tesla ends up coming down, we want to see this thing hold this 183 to 180 zone. It needs to hold that in order for there to be hope for the bulls. All right. So that's basically what I'm seeing for Tesla from the bullish and bearish case. The more bearish case would be Tesla coming down to about 180. And I mean, if it doesn't hold 180, that's going to be like not a good sign. But for the time being, I do believe Tesla's going to do it. So what I'm basically seeing is the same thing I mentioned earlier. If you look at the daily charts, I'm seeing Tesla potentially coming down like this, coming down to fill this gap. Maybe it's going to try to hold 185. I don't know for sure. It might come down to fill this gap and then get a really nice bounce between 183 and 180, or it might not even come down to fill the gap. It might just bounce from here and try pushing up after all the bullish news that came out involving Tesla killing it during deliveries. It has to be one of those, in my opinion. I'm not 100% sure about which one it's going to be, but either way, I'm predicting a big bounce to come. We either bounce from here and we see Tesla fly to like 190, maybe getting very close to 195, and then maybe by the end of the week we see Tesla get to about 200. That's very possible. The second possibility is Tesla coming a little bit lower to fill the gap first. It might be attracted to fill the gap, and then we bounce somewhere between, once again, 180 to 183. I believe one of those will most likely end up playing out. I am seeing a bounce coming, and I believe the odds favor Tesla eventually pushing as we approach Friday to try to get back to at least 195, if not 200, based off the options chain. All right, so I thank each and every one of you so much for listening. Please remain calm, cool, and collected. Do what you have to do, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Tesla to the moon because the long-term future is still incredibly bright, and peace out.